Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, please welcome the much belated production of your entertainment cavalcade of information and inspiration. Letters from Dad. Hey! Oh, that was too much. Way the fuck too much. Over the top, in fact. Hey, boo-boo. Once again, we are here. It is actually, April, beginning of April, and I have missed, one or two? I think I may have just missed one of our quarterly little video chats. And therefore it's been since October, I believe, that I did the last one. And the reason for that is multifold, as I will get into here in a minute. A lot has happened since we last touched base. Some of the most significant and impactful events of my life and of yours that you still live with as of the date that you are watching this occurred within this 6-month period. And it is one of the reasons for the delay. So we will get into that here in just a minute. You know, another thing is I was originally going to make this video about one thing, and then all of the events, which I will discuss with you in a minute, occurred, and that changed my trajectory of what I was going to talk about. But then as time has gone on, another thing that has occurred is I have really stressed out over doing this in a way that does justice to the emotional impact and profundity of the events that we'll discuss. And I have felt like perhaps I wasn't in a place to show you the depth of how all this affected me emotionally. But then I came to realize I'm just being a perfectionist, and putting it off because it's, not going to match some template in my head of how I want this video to be. And I'm just doing myself and you a disservice by putting it off. And so I decided to just jump in and do this today. So I have to get out of the car and into that office there. And Freddie needs to do that as well. And as soon as I do, we will get underway in earnest. All right. Well, this day is presenting me with the usual assortment of unplanned, unwanted, yet unavoidable delays and distractions, etc. So my original plan was to sort of do this video in a more relaxed way, in one sitting, at my office, actually, since no one's there today. It's Saturday. It's Saturday, April, I want to say 4th, but I'm not entirely sure, 2021. And that's the time I'm recording this. Obviously, I won't upload it today, likely. But in any case, best laid plans. I'm unable to really do that. And at this point, that flow was distracted earlier with several requirements, things I had to do. So I ended up coming home, taking care of you for a little while, and putting you down for a nap. And you are currently napping. I would say you're halfway through your nap if I'm lucky. If I'm not lucky, you'll wake up any minute. And so right now, you and Mommy, you're probably like 20-something when you're seeing this. But in any case, you and Mom are currently sleeping in the bedroom because she worked overnight last night. So I am with Freddie driving around at this point just down the street to hope, and I hope to get a fair chunk of this video in. But I might not. I might not get a lot of it in. I might only get some of it. but we're going to do and deal with what we got. Another thing that's happening is that this jackass is parked right where I was going to park, so that won't happen. Okay. Let's do a rewind sound. So, I'm not sure. I believe last we talked in this format, we were at Twin Lakes Church in October, and you were running around, and I think I was talking about COVID and, some of the things that have happened, both politically and with me losing some friends, almost losing a good friend, actually losing another friend. 2020 was a dark year, to say the least. And I had planned on continuing that video. I believe there's going to be a part 2 or something. And I fell behind on that. And then I just planned on doing it on January 1st instead. And wrapping it up at that point. However, or doing whatever the next part was going to be. The universe had different plans for me and for you. But before I get to that, let's talk about politics real quick, because that's a good thing, and COVID. Because those are some good places to start. First off, the election this year in 2021 was one of the most anxiety-producing, heavy, tumultuous, destructive, damaging elections this country has ever had. And Donald Trump did not give up. I mean, that's putting it lightly. He continued to sell his horse shit about interference in the election, which is all this fucking bullshit that he did, because in actuality, Russia helped him win the 2016 election. But that's a whole other story. The point is, everyone was real worried, because if Trump had won, I genuinely believe this country would be over right now. I literally think we would be under martial law. Our democracy would have died much more quickly than it is or has died, depending on what's happened between now and when you watch this. It's crippled anyway, but it would have been taken out at the pasture and shot if he had won. He tried every dirty trick in the book, every lie, everything he could, and he lost. Everybody was on pins and needles on election night. No one believed that he was going to lose. And it occurred to me, 2020, and 2016 through 2020, really, but 2020 being the crescendo of that, was a legitimately, acutely traumatic event for everybody, for the nation. And I truly believe that we suffer as a nation from PTSD, a collective sort of PTSD as a result of what happened and what he put this country through, and the hate, and the denial of rights, and the threats, and the fear, and the police violence. The good news is that, in being so flagrant and blatant with his hatred of all things different, being so pathological and obvious about his racism, sexism, homophobia, everything else, in doing so, he really galvanized those of us who believe in fucking just people being people and human rights and shit. A lot of people, I believe, who may not have otherwise been as concerned about, let's say, things around, transgender rights, let's say, or other things that may not particularly affect those individuals, started to realize that everybody's rights were on the line, and started to really realize the degree to which we all needed to band together to defeat him And in that case, in that way, we got created common cause enough to defeat him. It was still closer than it should have fucking been. You got one guy on the left-hand side who wants to grab women by the pussies, who has is under criminal investigations, multiple lawsuits by women saying he did inappropriate things, just litany after litany after litany of destructive behaviors that he's engaged in. What are you doing? Are you doing it? Okay, sorry, I was talking to the old lady trying to drive. And on the other hand, you got Joe Biden, who's, he's not all that. He's boring. But you know what? He fucking gives a shit about people, even if he's an old school politician with all the luggage that comes with that. Still, any day, if you're a black person in this country, a gay person in this country, a Latino, Jesus Christ, Trump caged children. That's not even the worst of it. He took families at the border who were here to apply for asylum. They were here to apply for asylum, to escape like gang violence and shit from their own countries. They came up to the border and said, could we? He snatched those fuckers up, separated the families, the children from the parents, all the way down to 2 or 3 years old, man. Slammed them in cages separately. And here's the real kicker. Eventually, fucking sent them randomly back down south without each other and without their families. Children were sent to countries they didn't come from without their parents to be preyed upon. Unbelievable. And yet it was such a small margin of victory that I was pretty baffled, but grateful. Okay, that's one thing. So great. You would think, phew, long national nightmare over. Donald J. Trump. Because the election happens, of course, and then several months go by before the actual transition of power. And after the election, Donald Trump and his brood of ill-mannered, ill-tempered, ill-begotten, ill sycophants and lawyers and attorneys refused to concede the election, filed multiple dozens and dozens of lawsuits against election commissions of different states, all of which were entirely baseless, all of which were dismissed out of hand immediately. Paper thin. It was a desperation move. Now here's the thing, Donald J. Trump was desperate indeed, because he, as long as he was in office, was protected legally from certain ramifications, criminal and otherwise, which once stripped of the presidency, he would be open to and liable for. Criminal prosecutions, prison time. He fought to keep his tax returns for 2017, I believe, a year in which he was already president, secret from the IRS and everybody else, and from the public. He fought tooth and nail to do that. Now, who fights tooth and nail to keep their tax returns a secret if there's nothing wrong with them? Okay? In this country, it's the money crimes that'll get you 20 years, which is pretty crazy. Kill someone, get 4. Take the government's money, oh, son, you going away for a minute. So, that, among other things, and evidence of collusion with foreign entities, coercion, corruption, all of it. His desperation intensified, increased, and became more wild and unfocused the more of those lawsuits he lost. The narrower his window of opportunity to claim a legal victory as president, the narrower that window got, the more desperate he got, until finally there were no more options to legally become the president, because he lost like a motherfucker. I mean, not as much as I want, but still sizable enough. So, what does he do? January 6th, 2021, just weeks before the inauguration, he is still holding rallies. He is still getting his fucking minions all whipped up and all frothy at the mouth, chanting in unison like Nazi zombies, "Stop the steal! Stop the steal!" referring to the stolen election. And he's got no more venues in court. It has been verified that he lost the election. A normal person would concede. Every other president in nearly 200 or over 200 years has done exactly that. Not Donald J. Trump, son. January 6th, he amasses, he plans, publicizes, and promotes a massive demonstration. He calls it a rally, quote unquote, in Washington, D.C. and puts the word out all over the country. Now, would you like to know what else was happening on January 6th in Washington, D.C.? The U.S. Senate and Congress were scheduled to finalize the election. So the election occurs, people vote, everything happens, and then there's an official procedural tabulation of those results, which, gets entered into the books officially saying, this is the deal, okay? It's a formality. However, it is truly the mechanism by which the presidency is awarded. And it is intended and supposed to, legally, follow the state-by-state electoral college results. There's nothing that says that anyone can deviate from that, but there's nothing that says they can't. So, if that counting can be stopped or reversed, if enough senators or congressmen can be persuaded to act unethically and potentially against the law, depending on what the Supreme Court would rule afterwards, then Donald J. Trump can steal the election. So what does he do? He amasses this fucking right-wing, QAnon brainwashed, fucking white supremacy driven. I want to say so many things that aren't right. I want to call them names. The truth is they're scared people whose way of life is changing, many of whom have not been necessarily educated in a way that would be conducive to them thinking for themselves, and most of whom come from a pervasive culture which has long been the case in vast segments of this country, where anytime something goes sideways, you point blame at the others, quote unquote. Minorities, gays, immigrants, they're the ones that are fucking everything up because they've been sold a pack of lies about what America means. They've been sold a pack of lies that capitalism and the dollar bill and making your own way and being a self-made man are realities and legitimate aspirations, when in reality they're tools that those in control use to pacify, distract, and confuse those susceptible to such tactics into not looking at the 1%, but looking at each other. If the 1% can get the population, each different segment of it, looking at one another as the enemy, they're safe. Because they'll come and say, hey now fellas, let's not, or whatever. Or they'll throw a bunch of Jews in ovens if they're Nazis. But they're untouchable in that case. So, he whips up this crowd in Washington, D.C., He and his ilk, Rudy Giuliani, a bunch of other speakers who spoke before him, and gets them frothy at the mouth. And then tells them, Donald J. Trump, our president, says this, what we're going to do now is we're all going to march to the Capitol building where the count was happening. And I'll go with you, he says. And we're going to take this country back. And the language used and the tone embodied and 4 years worth of violent rhetoric all informed the way that crowd interpreted those words in a way that was unmistakable. And they knew in their hearts that what he meant was to storm the Capitol. The U.S. goddamn Capitol. An act which hasn't been done ever. I mean, U.S. Capitol, I believe, was invaded during the, I think the British-American War in the early 1800s or something. But more or less, that was a foreign entity. That was war. That wasn't this. I believe in the Civil War, people were posted up to protect the building, but I don't believe anybody ever invaded it at that point. It was too far north. These motherfuckers, driven forth and enraged by that slime bag Trump, stormed the Capitol, got into the Capitol, and tried to take over this government in an insurrection. They were looking for Mike Pence, the vice president, Trump's own vice president, whom he felt betrayed him by not agreeing to break the law and miscount the votes. They were going to hang Mike Pence. They were looking for senators, in particular Democrats. They had zip ties. They had mace. They had guns. They had billy clubs. And they came in looking for heads. And those senators and the congressmen escaped by the hair of their chinny chin chin to safety bunkers, basically. And in the process, a protester was killed. A Capitol building police officer, or whatever they're called, I think they're the Capitol Police, was killed. Many people were injured. And the soul of America was plunged into crisis in a way which some might say was not new, but more acutely pronounced than before. This country has always had wounds and divisions that run very deep, so deep as to the heart of the soul of each individual within it. You have a nation that's built on the blood and toil and sweat and broken backs and kidnapping and abuse and murder and rape and destruction of entire cultures. It's built on the backs of Chinese immigrants forced to work at slave labor wages on railroads to build this country from coast to coast. You've got actual slaves from Africa. I mean, the entitlement, the violence, and you're on one side of that or you're on another. And at the heart of that question is, are all people inherently worth the same? Are all people's rights and hopes and dreams worthy of being considered and balanced and provided an opportunity for flourishing? Or are some people more than others, better than others, worth more? Some people have the right to proclaim and pass judgment on others simply because of their religion or the color of their skin or whatever. So that's been going on for a while. it was brought to the surface in a very bloody way on January 6th. Luckily, the nation was reclaimed, the capital was reclaimed, and there's a lot of people going to prison now. But it was the closest we've come to a genuine civil war in 100+ years, and I am not convinced that we're not headed there still. Anyway, that's politics. That's the backdrop which informs the end of this past year, 2020, and the very beginning of 2021. Amidst the roiling trouble and heavy, tumultuous black, the yoke of a velvet oppression, the yoke of a starless night, the frenetic heartbeat of a nation caught between anxiety and despair, in the grips of uncertainty and fear. Amidst that backdrop, the most impactful moment of your life and my life occurred on the afternoon of December 5th, 2021. A date that I will never, ever forget. And one which I am still attempting to heal from with respect to the PTSD that I believe I've developed as a result of it. What is that event, you may ask? Well, I'll tell you right after this. I gotta see if you're up yet. Because if you're awake and I'm not taking care of you, Mommy be upset. Okay, let's find out. Hi, before proceeding down this video, please understand that your stupid father said September 5th at the very beginning of this part of the video, when in reality, it was December 5th, not September 5th. Daddy doesn't always possess adequate cognitive function to speak correctly. Now that you know, you know. Carry on. I had to do a little change around there. So September 5th was a Saturday. And as per every Saturday, much as you can see in the previous video from October, that was also filmed on a Saturday, as is this today. But generally, until your afternoon nap, you and I, every Saturday, go out and do some kind of adventure. We go hiking, we go walking, we flew a kite recently for the first time. I try to take you out and about to do things, you know, that are exciting and fun, because I only get 2 days with you, really. So, I was doing that. Oh, here, look at this. This will be fun. Look at that. Isn't that nice? Hold on. Get a nice view. Poops. There you go. I guess I should clean this up. Hey, how you doing? Oh, it's a beaut. Oh, it's a juicy beaut. Oh, doggy poo. All right, that's fun times right there. Yeah. So, we were out gallivanting around. We were running around one of our usual places, which is Twin Lakes Church, where that one video was filmed. And, you know, everything was going fine. You know, I brought the little monster truck, radio-controlled monster truck thing that you like to push around, and we were, you know, I was pretty much just chasing you because you are a ball of kinetic energy. And, you know, we were going up and down. We were, you know, playing around on the playground and getting into mischief and climbing upstairs, which is one of the big things we were practicing at the time. And, generally just, expending energy and having fun together and chasing around. And I brought a ball to kick around, and then you would kick it back to me and all that stuff. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Just your average, typical Saturday daddy boo-boo day. The only thing that was a little different in retrospect was that you were a little clumsier that day than you always are anyway with your big, huge, humongous head. You're a little fella with a big head, like all toddlers. And, you've always been kind of prone to being top heavy or like not super coordinated, trying to do things that you can't necessarily do yet. Again, it's a human thing. Reaching to stretch and, try things that you don't realize physics won't allow. And so you're always a little bit clumsy, but this was, in retrospect, maybe a hair more than usual. In particular with respect to tripping, like falling over and tripping. Well, we're running down the farthest, most interior corner of the sprawling, very large Twin Lakes Church campus. And at that far end, there is nothing around except for the church. And then that church is, there's like the far corner of the church, farthest removed from all the parking lots, from any street or anything like that. And then there is like a gully, which is like an expansive, overgrown area. I'm not even sure what's really down there, if it's like a little creek or something, I'm not sure, but it's a bunch of like wild woods basically, and there's like a housing development way far over on the other side of it. And then on the other side of that sort of furthest most corner, rear corner, is a long sort of drop of a hill, kind of steep embankment, which borders the freeway. And so, that's like, of course, walled off and, it's a chain link fence. And of course, that's just the sound of traffic down there. There's no one to come or hear you or anything like that. And it's also way down there. It's down below that rear corner of that church, which sort of stands atop an embankment, I guess. Well, there we are. Farthest most corner of that church on an access road, which runs the length of that rear side of the church. So we are basically in the most remote part of the church, a church which has a sprawling campus, which is damn near completely empty. I mean, it's pretty much dead empty. On the other side of, if you were to go all the way out to the parking lot and to the little road that separates that church from Cabrillo College, you would see that there's another sprawling, even more sprawling campus, the Cabrillo College campus, just on the other side of that road that separates the two. And over there was a motorcycle class, which happens every Saturday afternoon, where people are learning how to drive their motorcycles in a parking lot, Cabrillo College parking lot, which is right up against that little dividing road. And so there were a handful of motorcycles and scooter riders taking instruction from the person leading that little thing, and weaving in and out of cones and stuff like that to get their license. But they were far away because they were over at the Cabrillo campus. But those were the only people in the entire area that I can think of that I thought were even there. All right. As we're running down this access road, everything's peachy keen. And in fact, I have a video, which I'll put at the very tail end of this video, that I took just through happenstance of you running and playing on that very road, just yards away from where the incident would come to happen. That video was taken mere seconds before the event. And at the you'll see on that video a large building, or a long building on the right-hand side. At the far end of that building is where the event occurred. So, come on, Fred. We're running down that road, and you keep reaching for the ball or the monster truck at different times. And I think it was the ball. And you're running, and you reach down for the ball, and you seemingly trip. That's what it looked like to me, like you tripped. And fell, face first, into the dirt, into the fucking rocky, hard access road dirt, right? So it's like a dirt road, but like it's been compacted. There's rocks. It's hard. Okay. Well, I have a general policy with you of not flipping out right off the bat. I want to see, because then that makes you flip out. So if there's, nothing actually wrong, I don't want to be like, oh my God, and then cause you to think there's something wrong. So I always try to assess what's going on with you first before, I react. So I generally, usually when something like that happens, I go, oh no, boo-boo, like, you okay, buddy? I try to be light about it with the intention of saying, oh, poor guy, you're okay though, let's go. That kind of thing. Well, I say that stuff as I approach you. You're only a few feet away from me. And, Freddie, we can come back this way. You want to come back this way? No answer, no response, no reply. And I think in my head at that moment, because I thought I saw you moving just a little bit, I think to myself that you're playing games with me. You're being a silly boy, because if you were hurt, you would immediately start crying, if you were actually hurt, if you bumped your head or something, and felt it. And so I'm like, now, boo-boo, stop playing around. And I lean down to sort of jostle you, and I jostle your back, and you don't move. Now I'm like, it's like if the world is filmed, if the world is like this to the normal mind, everything starts going like this. But I don't want to think anything's wrong, because my brain can't even really compute or conceive of anything being seriously wrong. So I'm like, okay, maybe he's just kind of groggy or something. Maybe he kind of conked himself, but I just need to sort of jolt him awake or something. I wasn't sure, but I also didn't want to believe that anything was wrong. So I reached down. I'm like, come on, boo-boo, don't play games. And I pick you up. And I know the minute that I pick you up that something is very wrong. Freddie, come here. Let's go this way, okay? You are rigid at first, yet limp. And I can't even really describe it other than to say you're heavier than usual. You're not moving in the right way. When I first pick you up, you're kind of rigid like a board in a way. And your head is over to the side. And I turn you around to look at your face. And that's when I see your mouth is agape, slack-jawed. I can't even probably make the face. I mean, I don't even think I would want to. Your head is over to the side of your mouth. I probably can't make the face because my muscles would have to be devoid of all energy, because I'm conscious. I don't think I could actually make the face that you were making, because you were not conscious. You were slack-jawed. Your jaw was so wide open and tilted to the side that it looked unnatural. And it's when I looked at your eyes that I truly knew the extent, because your eyes were rolled up into the back of your head, and all I saw was white, a thin, faint slit of white. And then you started to convulse several times, like sort of spasm a few times. And at that point, I'm like, at that point, I start going, boo-boo, 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 boo-boo. Because I'm thinking, and I'm shaking you a little bit, and because I'm thinking that you fell down and hit your head. and that you got knocked out. I've seen people get knocked out before in fights and stuff, and it looked similar to me. So I thought maybe you really hit your head hard on your frontal lobe, which, again, that's a problem for somebody 2 years old, and potentially deadly, life-changing. And so that's what I'm thinking it is, because I can't conceive of it as being anything else. So I'm like, boo-boo, 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 wake up, boo-boo. And I'm starting to panic, and my heart is starting to pound, and my breath is rapid and shallow. My heartbeat is racing. And as I'm doing that, I'm like, no, this can't be, no, boo-boo, boo-boo. I'm getting louder and louder than I'm going to be right now, because people around here would hear me. And each passing moment became more abstract and horrific and terrifying and non sequitur and inconceivable than the one before it. Because as I was doing that, you stopped convulsing. You went entirely limp. And I heard what can only be described as, I watched my father die. I watched my father die in front of me when he passed away. And there's a thing called a death rattle. They're the final involuntary kind of breaths that the body's taking as it shuts down. They're very distinct. If you've heard it once, you'll always recognize it. And it's kind of like a really shallow, really sudden, really quick, and ever diminishing in frequency. And as you went limp, you draped over my arm as I'm holding you to me like a fish, which is probably one of the most disturbing parts of the whole thing, because nobody's body or spine should bend that far back that easily. And you were like water, you were like heavy water in my arms. And then the death rattle stopped, and you almost instantly started turning blue. And this all happened over the course of, it's hard for me to even tell you honestly, because time travels differently in those circumstances, but 30 seconds, a minute at most, if that, probably 30 seconds, 45 seconds maybe. And as I'm like, you turn limp and you turn blue and you go limp and you stop and the death rattle stops. My panic and terror at what's happening, or my sort of denial of it, became something altogether different, because I realized that this was life or death, literally. And you're the most important person in this world to me, and there was no one around. And it had been several years since I had taken CPR. And quite frankly, I went into an absolute panic. Now, I've had guns held on me before. Back in the day when I was in the life, I had people point guns. I had a gun held directly to my face at 6 inches away by a very sketchy gentleman. And in that circumstance, everything slowed down. I was very calm. My survival mode kicked in. Everything went very slow. I made methodical decisions to save my own life. But when it came to you, I was unable to be calm or act in a purely logical manner. Now, I made a couple of good decisions, I believe. As this is all happening and I'm escalating in my yelling, I realized, fuck, the most important thing for me to do is to call 911 and to run to somewhere where A, an ambulance could get to you, and B, where maybe people might be to help me. And I dropped everything I had except you, and I ran faster than I've ever run in my entire life. And I'm 50 and not really in shape, towards the parking lot and where that road is that divides, Cabrillo from Twin Lakes and towards those motorcycle people. But they were a ways away. So I called 911. I had the presence of mind to do that. I didn't have the presence of mind to talk to them. But I knew they would GPS my phone or whatever the fuck, know where I am. And what I did instead was sprint like a motherfucker, screaming as loud as I could possibly scream, "Help! Help! Help me! Help me! Help me!" over and over at about that pace, or about that, frequency or whatever, and that pace, but actually louder, like much, much, much louder, full-throated. And I never relented. From the time that it took me to get from that back road to the parking lot, sprinting, I was screaming at the top of my lungs like that for help. And you were turning bluer and bluer in my arms. And I knew, just knowing what I know about medicine and about the body, having been a caregiver, having, Pam being a CNA, I knew that you were dying, that your brain was going without oxygen, and that each next step that I took and each second that passed, you receded further and further from being my little boy and into the realm of being a horrific memory. And I felt helpless, and I felt worthless and incapable and terrified and desperate. And all I could do was run as fast as I could run and scream as loud as I could scream. And by the time I got to the parking lot, 2 minutes or so probably had passed. Now, at that point, we are on the verge, if not already surpassed, potential brain damage, if not brain death. Lack of oxygen to a toddler's brain in particular, because a toddler's oxygen, either blood oxygen, they lose their oxygen faster. The cells lose the oxygen faster. So you were, by the time I got up to that parking lot, in, who knows, maybe dead. In my mind, I was hoping against hope and fighting against what felt like this oppressive demon breathing down my neck, fresh on my heels, galloping after me to snatch you away from my life. And I felt him right there. And it was a toss-up. So I finally reached the parking lot. I am in a desperate panic. I finally see this one kid, 20-something years old probably, longish hair, getting into his car. I don't know what he was doing there, where he was from. He was getting into his car, which was located in the parking lot of Cabrillo, right next to that divider road I told you about, between Cabrillo and Twin Lakes. I looked directly at him. There is zero mistaking the state that I'm in, I'm an expressive person, as you know. And so in a state of absolute, genuine panic, I am looking directly at him. By now, I am completely out of breath and gasping, but I'm still screaming and sprinting. I'm looking directly at him going, help me, help me, help me, help me. He looks at me and he gets in his car like he's gonna leave. And that might be the most demoralizing moment of the entire ordeal. The most demoralizing, helpless, hopeless part of that experience was screaming directly at this guy with you, my dead boy, in my arms, turning blue, not breathing, and him getting in the car like he's just gonna drive away. I couldn't believe it, you know? And I didn't have time to fucking belabor the point. So I just veered slightly. I veered slightly to try to head over to where the motorcycle people were. At this point now, they all see me, or at least some of them do. Some of them are under their helmets and, you know, in their motorcycle vroom vrooms, but like the instructor sees me, a few other people, and they're looking at me, but it's almost like they didn't want it to be real, or like they were in denial. Now, look, I had a lot of resentment for a minute, especially about that kid who just got in his car, but I realized what a horrific sight for anybody to see, you know? Just some guy like with a kid just screaming like that. I mean, that's too real. Some people, they just don't. It's not that they don't give a shit. It's they don't know what to do and they're terrified to get involved. So I'm still screaming. I'm still running. As I'm running towards them, I see a group of people, about 6 people, coming out from one of the church buildings, much closer to me. And they, thank God, take notice and come over to me and say, what's going on? And I tell them, you know, I'm so out of breath at this point. It's so hard for me to even communicate. But I'm like, I don't know. You just felt, I think your head, you're not breathing. You're turning blue. I don't know what to do. You know, I was just, and I set you down next to a tree, kind of in the middle of that group. And I was like, help. And I thought you were dead. I thought you were dead. I thought it was over. But man, as I'm there doing that, a man walks over to me and he starts calming me down and asking me clear, short questions, putting his hand on my back, asked me if I called 911. I hand the phone to somebody who can actually speak logically to them, to talk to them about what's happening. And at that moment, a man comes over to you. I'm like, help, he's not breathing. And he leans down, he checks your pulse and puts his ear to your mouth. And I'm like, do you know CPR? And he's like, yeah. And he takes you and he breathes life back into you. He gave you your life. He gave you your life in that minute. He breathed back into you and you started breathing on your own again. It wasn't normal breathing. It was shallow. It was tenuous. It was faint. You were still completely limp, but your heart was at least doing something and you were breathing. You were getting oxygen. At that point, I'm like, I don't believe that you're better. He's got you in his arms. They've handed me the phone again to talk to 911, to give them information I can only give them. And I keep on looking over to the guy. Is he okay? Are you sure he's okay? Because I didn't believe that he was okay because he was still so limp in his arms. Are you sure he's breathing? He's like, yeah, just talk to them. So then a couple minutes later, not long later at all, thankfully, a sheriff rolls up, a female deputy, and then she starts asking me questions and sort of demanding my focus. Look at me, that kind of thing. And then the ambulance rolls up. And the man hands you over to the ambulance people. And the deputy is trying to keep me occupied to ask questions. And at one point, I want to go over and see what's going on with you because they've now taken you into the ambulance out of my sight. And I start to what's going on? I'm like a wild animal. I'm basically a caged wild animal at that point, pacing back and forth. And I'm like, what's going on with him? And I start to sort of barge over to the ambulance. The sheriff stops me, says, no, hold on, stay with me. What I came to find out later is the reason she did that is because you had stopped breathing again and gone into cardiac arrest again. And they were putting the paddles to you. They're clear. I didn't know that at the time, though. Probably best I didn't. And she asked me questions, etc. and so forth. And they don't really tell me anything about what's going on with you. They basically say, we're doing everything we can. We're going to take him to Dominican. We got to get him there now, basically. And they take off with you. And what started off as just a day of me and my boy has turned into a true nightmare and a horror. And in that moment, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to feel. I'm in shock, and I am chasing my own tail. So at that point, one guy says, do you mind if we pray over you, basically? Now, as you've probably heard me say countless times, I always consider the private religious junior high I went to be the responsible party for curing me of religion, for which I'm grateful. And I'm not one to be prayed over. But in this instance, I'm like, pray away, man. And what I will say about that is that collective energy and spirit and focus, which I do believe in, was the first thing to start to in any way calm me down. From there, I hitched a ride with one of those 6 people, back to over to Dominican. Turns out that guy was the youth pastor of the church of Twin Lakes. And I am very grateful to him for being with me on that trip and for talking to me and being a generally kind, compassionate, calming influence on me in those moments. And he said, you should probably call the mother. And that's when I knew I had to call Pam. Probably the hardest phone call I've ever made in my life. I don't even remember what I said to her. I think I just blurted it out, what was going on. And, she knew instantly that it was some serious shit. Your mom, much to her credit, in times like those, has a knack and an ability to focus up in the same way I did when that gun was held to my head. She can exercise that ability in more circumstances and to greater effect than I. So she got in our car and left the apartment and met me at Dominican, where you were already sequestered away from me and in the emergency room, or not, whatever, the ICU, whatever it is. And I didn't know what they were doing. I didn't know what was going on. And I couldn't go in to see you because guess what? This is motherfucking COVID. Because this goddamn public health crisis, because 2020 was the fucking year, and because Donald goddamn J. Trump couldn't get his shit together enough to do anything about it, to put any infrastructure into place or anything else, we were in the middle of a damn pandemic, which was killing a lot of people at the time. And so guess what? Unless you were absolutely necessary, you weren't getting in. So I was outside while they were working on you, and I didn't know if you were alive or dead or what. Social worker talked to me for a while. I'm grateful to her for that. And then your mom got there, and as soon as she got there, we just collapsed into each other and cried. Or I cried, and she did too. But she was also, as soon as she got there, they basically waved her in, like as mom. They asked us at that point if one of us wanted to come in, and we both knew that it should be your mom because she's your mom. She's mom, and like from day one, she's had a physiological effect on you, and is the one who can, in a moment, more easily, with just her presence, soothe you, calm you, reassure you. I'm getting better at it, but nonetheless. And so, she arrives, as soon as she gets there, the social worker who's been hanging out with me sees that she's there and, basically says, which one he wants to go. You want to go, Mom, let's get you in there. Because they had to suit her up and put, masks on her and shit. So your mom and I sort of hugged. She teared up. I saw she kept her shit together because she knew she had to see you. And she went in. An eternity passed. I called my mom, who came down. It was one of the first times that my mom and your mom and I were together in unity since all the great disrupted argument and all the stuff that went down between us when we were staying there. And about 10,000 million years later, approximately, I saw a helicopter land, and then a nurse came out and asked if I wanted to come in to join your mom and you, and I said no. And I went in, and you were in the ICU, critical. You were intubated. Basically, they induced you into a coma, which is protocol, because they don't know what's going on. Why do you keep having heart attacks, right? So what they want to do is decrease the stimuli, induce you into a medically induced coma, intubate you so that you're breathing, so you're getting oxygen no matter what, and basically shut off your brain, until everything's been checked out, get it back online. So that's what they did. I'm not sure how they do that exactly, but they induced you into a coma. They you were already unconscious anyway, but they regulate it in some way to make it more regulated. And intubated you, stuck a tube all the way down your throat, and you were surrounded by medical professionals with your tiny little naked body, with tubes in your mouth and IVs in your arms, your little arms. And they let me know that they were preparing to Medi-flight you. They let me know that you'd been stabilized, but you were nowhere near out of the woods. They let me know what was going on there. And they let me know that they were going to Medi-flight you and your mom, who could go with you on the helicopter, to Stanford Lucille Packard's Children's Hospital, which is the Stanford Children's Hospital, Stanford University, one of the most prestigious medical research universities anywhere, and the only place on the face of this earth I'd ever want you. And I am so grateful how close we live to Stanford. I'm so grateful that Stanford was there and an option. I don't know what the fuck people do in Wisconsin. You just would have been fucked. So they informed me that you were going to be Medi-flighted to Stanford. Your mother would be accompanying you, and I should gather some things together, from the house and drive over to Stanford, over the hill, and meet you guys there. I knew there was no way I was driving. No way I was driving because there's no way. I was in no shape, emotionally, physically, anything to drive. So my mom, thankfully, being there, agreed to drive me. And so I stood there in the parking lot as you were wheeled out to the waiting helicopter, which with blades that were whirring and whipping up sound, idling. And then your mom followed and got into the helicopter and waved. And a whole team of medical professionals surrounded you in the back of that helicopter. And the blades started to whir faster as the engine rose in pitch, as the wind whipped up and the dust dispelled. And that helicopter slowly took flight. And once it got up to a certain degree, it made a rapid, quick turn facing the other direction. Basically, when it's kind of like a 3/4 turn quickly, and fucking started hauling ass through the sky towards the horizon to Stanford Medical Center and to an unknown fate. And I watched that helicopter disappear, get smaller until it vanished behind the horizon. And then I absolutely lost my shit and crumpled down to the floor, to the ground, and sobbed. About 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and then slapped myself the fuck awake and got up and said, fucking get my shit together and let's go. And I drove back to our apartment and gathered up what I could think to gather, several days worth of clothing. In that moment, being completely unsure as to whether or not we'd even be there more than a matter of hours, or if we would be coming back to begin planning a funeral. And that's part one of the story of what happened on December 5th, 2020. Spoiler alert, you survived. But that was unknown, to say the least, at that time. And little did I know that actually our anxiety and fear and stress and journey was just beginning, because we would end up being at Stanford for 3 weeks determining what was wrong. And I'll share that little story with you on the next episode installment. But I'm going to do that here now, like tonight. You won't have to wait 3 months. Okay. See you real soon. All right. Welcome to part 2. Several days later. But what can you do? Scheduling being what it is and life being as hectic as it is, this was my first opportunity. So, to continue on with what we were talking about, I believe when we left off, we were talking about being medi-flighted, you and me saying, watching you and Mom disappear off into the sunset there. And so from there, my mom gave me a ride back to our apartment, where currently we still live, and where we lived when this happened a few months ago. And I gathered up stuff, and my thinking at the time was my thinking was to gather up a few days worth of stuff, because I was still operating under the assumption that that I thought you'd hit your head and that you must have really knocked yourself out, or that there was something going on there, and that either it was going to be a real short trip to Sanford, which I don't even want to think about, or it was going to be something that we were able to clear up pretty quickly. Of course, I was still in a haze, in a daze, in a fog of suspended state of suspended stress, trauma, all that. So, and I kept veering back and forth between having these thoughts that I just described about, well, hopefully everything is, going to be okay, versus, then I would careen into the idea of he's probably dead. They're probably just keeping him alive on life support. And, along with sort of thoughts of my own failures, thinking that I was failing or that I'd failed you. I'm trying to make like the perfect deal with God. If I give this up, will you save his life? But I don't really believe in a God like that. But at the same time, I'm like, maybe I should be believing in a God like that. Maybe it's the fact that I don't believe in a God like that that's caused this to happen. So you start to sort of generate all these thoughts about how it's somehow your fault, mystically, magically, through some wrong decision that you've made, and you better make the right decision about which deal to make with God. And in retrospect, I realized the insanity of that. But it felt so urgent and important. It felt like I had to make the right decision about that, or else you would die. And I think maybe on some level that's a reaction to feeling completely out of control, that there's nothing you can do, and wishing that you can or could do something, and maybe if you make the right decision, that will be a way of you doing something. And then if you're like me and you suffer from anxiety and overthinking and ADHD and all this other shit, then you just really drill that into the ground. So I would sort of fall prey to that every once in a while, and then I'd try to lift up out of it, and I would remind myself, if anything that I do matters, then probably what that is that matters is me manifesting positive vibes, me sending out good vibes to the universe, me leaning into you being okay. There's a, and the proper part of the things, I do believe in mystical stuff. I mean, I'm not a religious person, but I believe in stuff that people don't understand mattering. They've done studies at universities where, they had people focus on, a ball that would come down through these little trap things, and focus on it going left and not right, even though it was a 50-50 chance that it would either go left or right once it hit this little center divider thing. And it showed a statistically measurable difference in, let's say people were praying for the ball to go left, like it was like, I don't know, 55% of the time it went left as opposed to 50. So measurable, so that's what I decided to do. And there's a story about like the way a rain dance is done, which is they don't ask for rain for this particular tribe, and I can't remember the tribe. The shaman who described this was that a rain dance isn't dancing in and asking for rain, it's thanking the universe for the rain as if it's already come. It's manifesting it through the certainty of its arrival, not asking, and giving thanks and gratitude as if it already has. So I was trying to lean into that. It's difficult. Now I'm going to stop this for just a minute just to make sure that my voice is being picked up, because I realize the little mic thing is over here. Hold on. Fucking tastic. It sure is. So we drove over to Stanford. I hadn't been to Stanford in forever. Took us about, I don't remember, 45 minutes or something, an hour maybe, with getting everything together. Went over there, talked to your mom. She let me know that because you had arrived like a lot sooner, because with that helicopter at the speed it was going in a straight line, you got there within like 15 minutes or 20 minutes or something insane. So your mom was keeping me posted, let me know that you were taken out of the helicopter and that you were in the ICU. And so I checked into Stanford and found my way up to the ICU. And that's when I saw you there. Still induced into a medically induced coma, still unconscious, still with a ventilator tube stuck down your throat. I mean, it's really traumatic to see that, because it's this tube. It's going all the way down into where your lungs are and stuff, and it's breathing for you. So at that point, it's unknown if you will breathe for yourself, if your heart will beat correctly, if not monitored and driven by this breathing tube. Because at that point, we don't know if you're breathing on your own at all, or if you're just strictly breathing because this tube is pushing air into you, which is sort of keeping everything else regulated. So, and you're still induced. And then we settle in as best we can to basically bug and ask everybody around us all the time what's next, because we didn't know. And essentially what they told us was that they were going to monitor you for a while, make sure you were stable, and then try little things here and there incrementally to measure your responses and build up to extubating you and bringing you out from the medications. So the first thing they do is they lighten up the medications a little bit so you're not quite as sedated. Then a little while later, they sort of poke your foot, see if you respond to those things. At first you didn't, tripped me out. Then you did, little by little. You're still unconscious, you're still under this coma stuff. Pam and I are on the little couch that's right next to you, constantly seeing people run in. I mean, there's not 5 minutes that goes by that you're not being tended to. And we're talking to you, trying to figure out just what to do. We keep asking permission for everything. Like, can I talk to him? Can we? And so as they continue to bring you out of the meds little by little, hour by hour, we're starting to talk to you more and just let you know that we're there and that you're going to be okay. Hoping, but saying that you will. And stroking your, little arms and stuff, and trying to live in a state of positivity and not despair or catastrophe. I would say maybe 16 hours in, things start to really change. They've been bringing you out of this medication little by little. And so it's kind of like one medication, sort of long-acting, slow, medication that really keeps you under. And as they bring you out of that, they increase the fast stuff that they can pull quicker. So when they pull that fast-acting stuff, you'll come out sooner. It won't take as long as it does for the other stuff to wear off. So they make that little balance change. And then about 16 hours later, I'd say, or so, 12 hours later, middle of the night, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, you can tell they're going touch and go too. They're making decisions in the minute. And so when they did extubate you, it was kind of a spur of the moment decision, or it was like all signs point to let's do this now. We weren't necessarily expecting that they were going to do that in that moment, but then they start to do it. It starts to get hectic. Your heartbeat goes up, and that's one of the things that's so difficult, is like that, hearing that heart monitor. Everything is going higher and higher and higher. Your respirations are rising. And I'm thinking, fuck, this is bad. I'm thinking this is a bad sign. And one of the nurses actually pulled me aside and said, this is actually really good because it means he's responding. So this happened repeatedly while we were in there, that I would think something was horrible and they would let me know that this is actually good. So they extubate you. And once they do that, within like half an hour, they're clamping it down. They're shutting down the medications. Then about half an hour later, you wake up like in a panic, kind of like, what the fuck is going on? And just immediately start crying. Which from your perspective, you know, 1 minute you're running around, you know, outside during the daylight, and the next minute you're in some fucking UFO with a bunch of aliens with masks on, tending over you. And by the way, because this is during COVID times, normal procedures are completely different. So people are in hazmat gear, like whereas you might have seen human faces if this was in another year that this had happened. This, in this case, you're seeing people from head to toe covered, and even mom and dad having to wear masks. But you just start crying and bawling, and mommy holds you. And I am just elated at that point that you're breathing on your own. You're breathing on your own. And we managed to get you calmed down a little bit. And you eventually drift off to sleep. Now my next concern is, mentally, how are you going to be? Were you deprived of oxygen too long to maintain your faculties? Are you going to be a little slow? Are you going to be different? Are there going to be some cognitive issues? That's the next big hurdle. I'm unable to sleep for like several days, including this night. I try to lay down. I do lay down. It's several things make it impossible, not the least of which being people running in and out of the place all the time, and the beeps and the everything. So that gets us into a multi-day long process to figure out what's going on and how to stabilize you. Are you stable? What happened? What's next? And that is all a process dictated by protocols, which we don't understand, but Stanford does. In retrospect, I think that was first making sure that you were stable in general. And then started days and days worth of a battery of tests. They were constantly poking you, sticking you, taking blood, changing your IV ports, taking you in for x-rays, taking you in for MRIs, none of which were you having. You were not excited about any of that. Over the course of several days, they narrowed it down. They realized, first off, that you didn't hit your head. So this is not a thing that happened. They realized that you went into AFib, that you had a fatal arrhythmia. Now the question is why? What happened? Toxicology, of course, comes back negative because he didn't get into anything. So now they are theorizing, could this be some sort of fatal arrhythmia, et cetera, and so forth. And after doing a bunch of tests, they basically come to Pam and I and say, you know, we think it's this particular type of arrhythmia. I'm never going to be able to say the name. It's some multi-syllabic thing. But we need to do a DNA test and on you two, mom and dad, to see if he inherited this from you guys or if this was an anomaly or what, and see if it's actually the thing. So they do a genetic test on you first off. They come to the conclusion that yes, it is this rare fatal arrhythmia. And in the 40 plus, if not longer, years, if not more, many years that Stanford had been around at this point, they'd only ever dealt with like 16 other kids who came in with this condition. And the vast majority of them die where they fall. The vast majority of kids with this die right where they fall. And they're never revived. And just the unknown, the combination of the unknown. Each new piece of information we would get just led to 10,000 more questions for us in a lot of ways. And so we're always in this suspended state of animation. And also, is this going to happen again? What happens if it happens again? And when? Can it happen right now? Thank God you're here at Stanford, but still. So next thing is to do a DNA test on Mom and I. They do that test. We were actually one of the first people to partake in an experimental DNA process, a procedure wherein they can get your entire genome instead of in several weeks. Right now, for the majority, 99% of the world, it takes weeks to come back with your full genome. Stanford had just finished with a set of clinical trials around this procedure that means that they could get your whole genome in hours, not weeks, hours. And we were one of the first people ever to be able to participate in that, which another reason why I'm just so grateful that we were there. So they came back with that. Turns out, nope, neither Mom nor I have anything that would have led to you developing that that fatal arrhythmia. So that's a genetic mutation for some reason, and who knows why. That's still an unknown. That's nature for you. Shit mutates. So that's when they come up with that's when they come up with the plan of action. And that plan of action is to, and this is now about a week in, which, by the way, again, I have had very little sleep. I've started to sleep a little bit at night, but stress and everything just kept me up all the time. Started a Kickstarter campaign to help raise money for bills and stuff because I'm out of work now. I mean, I was going to get paid family leave and everything, but still, rent was coming before that was going to come. So trying to handle finances while also staying present for you. About a week into it or so, around the time I'm about to talk about, they'd moved us out of the ICU for a while ago. And we're finally in a kind of a normal hospital room. And you were happy-ish again because they weren't sticking you as much. And you were feeling energized again. And by the way, the next day after they extubated you, when you started to woke up and said, Mom, Dad, and all these things, that's when I felt that second wave of relief. That thank God you're present. You're here. You're you. So at this point, though, a week in, you're bored, man. You want to run around. You want to go places. So, we're taking you on cart rides. You're running around the hospital bedroom because finally we're in a room that doesn't have nothing but sharp edges because the ICU room and the other rooms that we had been in all had these fucking deadly corners right at your head level from all the hanging equipment in there. And so we always had to stop you from running around. Well, finally you're feeling better. You're running around. We're having fun. There's some videos that we put up on Facebook of you running around in your little hospital gown. But now we find out we're going to have to shut all that down because what we need to do for your safety is open chest surgery, major surgery, 8 hours worth of surgery, wherein 3 basic procedures will be done. First off, a pacemaker defibrillator implanted right down your chest. That's why you have a scar. I don't know if you still do by the time you're seeing this. I'm not sure. Perhaps it's faint. I don't know. But pretty pronounced at this age that you are right now in my timeline. Opened your chest. Went in. Opened your ribs and shit. Cracked your sternum. And put a pacemaker defibrillator right next to your heart, which will detect if you ever have the conditions which indicate that arrhythmia is imminent. In which case, it'll give you a patoo. I don't know if you've ever experienced that or not in your time frame, but luckily so far in mine you haven't. So they did that. The other thing they did. Oh, and by the way, it's all hooked up to Bluetooth and our phones and stuff like that. So if anything happens, we know. And then the other thing they did is something called a sympathectomy, which apparently there is there's something that goes, and I'm not a medical guy, okay, but there's something that goes from your central nervous system essentially into your heart, into your aorta, which is a redundancy, which is responsible for introducing adrenaline into your system should you need it. Now, it exists survival-wise as a redundancy, as a backup to some other part of your heart that already does this primarily. It's already this other part's primary duty to do that. This exists as sort of make sure you did that thing so that, when the wildebeest jumps out of the cave, you can grab your spear and kill it. It's a holdover from Ugh days. So they found that in kids with this condition, one of the better remedies on top of the defibrillator is to snip that little, about an inch's worth of this little tube, essentially, from your central nervous system into your heart that introduces that adrenaline, because that's part of what causes the arrhythmia. Is like you'll get excited. So like when you, the thing to note about when you fell, by the way, is that you fell once and then jumped right back up and tried to run and fell immediately again. That's the part I forgot to tell you before. That's key. Because what happened is when you fell once and you jump back up, adrenaline. You're like, jump up, get to going. But it was too much. It hit it with too much, which shocked it basically and threw it into this arrhythmia, into this fatal arrhythmia. And so you kind of like, and fell because your heart stopped right then and there. So they snipped this part responsible for introducing that adrenaline. That's the second part of the surgery. And the third part is putting the battery pack for the defibrillator into your stomach, which right now it's pretty big in your stomach. And in about 10 years, when you're about, 10 years old, or 8 years actually, when you're about 10 years old or so, we'll go in to get it replaced. So this required a team of surgeons, all of whom were very cool about telling us what was going to happen. One team came in to do the sympathectomy, then another team to do the defibrillator, and then like a wrap-up team to do the battery and everything. It was going to be an 8-hour surgery. Every few hours, they would call us in during that day, which first off, by the way, as we were prepared for that surgery, and it was kind of like a one-day preparation thing. It's like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do it tomorrow. When they tell you about that stuff, they prepare you for all that can go wrong. They have to. And that is not a pretty conversation to have. And it fills you with dread, because the truth is you could have died again right on that table. And as rare as that is at Stanford, it has happened. It has absolutely happened there. So we just hugged the shit out of you and kissed you and tried to spend the evening with you before going in. Your appetite was shit. You weren't eating anything. You weren't sleeping right. You'd started to perk up. Your appetite was actually improving, and we knew that right around the corner was going to be a whole new round, if we were lucky, of you getting, stuck with needles and monitored and not feeling good and all that. So spent the night with you. I didn't sleep for shit. And when it was time to go, we were able to walk down with you to the prep room. And wheeled you down there. Actually, I held you. Actually, I carried you down there. and had to be like, try to distract you with some cartoons, as they sort of introduced some drugs to make you sleepy and all that, and told you everything was going to be okay, see you soon, and watch them wheel you out of our lives into an environment where your fate was at the hands of strangers holding scalpels. And just hoped for the best. And spent 8 hours that day. Every few hours they would bring us in, let us know what was going on with a little update. Those updates were fine. Everything was going well. That was good. Then the last update was basically he's going to be out of surgery. Everything went well. You should be able to see him within the hour. That hour passes. Then another hour. And we're asking what's going on. We're not getting any answers. And I'm getting a little more insistent. Finally, we get somebody who says he should be with you soon. I don't know exactly what's going on. So it's just stalling again, really. Another hour passes. So what was going to be 8 hours has been 10-something hours. And finally, they wheel you out. And your mom and I are just beside ourselves. And they tell us, the anesthesiologist comes out and talks to us and says, basically, they had a real hard time getting your blood pressure under control. And it was really erratic. And it would spike. They could never get it to, like, usually it's a lot easier to get it within parameters, I guess. But they would do one thing and it would spike. They'd do another thing, it would drop out. And they still don't know why. They still don't know why it was so difficult to get your blood pressure under control. But thank God they did. But that was another sort of like traumatic moment of realization, you know. And so then we go in and we see you. You're out like a light. And now you have a scar. You know, well, you have a big bandage over your chest. And now starts the process of making sure that you recuperate. And this was probably the worst of it, I think, for you. Because when you woke up, you were just immediately in pain. It did not feel good. Your chest had been cracked open. Your ribs had been opened up. I mean, you had staples at first in your chest that they had to pull out. You were stuck in 3 different places with IVs, which they were constantly changing around. You couldn't get up. You wanted to get up, but you couldn't. And this was the worst part because this is where you really got depressed. And you kind of gave up. And we would bring toys in. And they were having a really hard time getting your, I don't know if there's blood pressure. We were having a hard time getting you to eat. And we were having a hard time getting you to poop. That was a big one. And we were having a hard time, I think, stabilizing your blood pressure again to some degree. But for days we're dealing with this, and you are just dragged down and depressed. And nothing is fun for you. I mean, and you'd be cranky sometimes, but oftentimes you'd just be like, fuck it. We try to put on good little movies and fun little movies and stuff. And, you know, after you realized nobody was going to let you get up, you kind of gave up on that. And so you would watch these movies and then you'd cry a little bit. And then and there's a picture of mom holding you. And your little eyes are just like looking up at her. It's just so sad and depressed. And we just wish that you would know that this wasn't going to be forever. But there's no way to let you know that. No way. So we would get toys and stuff, try to play with you in bed. Finally, once they took out the staples from your chest, which, by the way, that was a bad day too, because I didn't like that. they gave us permission to start to get you up a little more, and you hadn't been on your feet for a week, so we had to be careful about that. Finally got you over to play with some trucks and stuff on the sort of fold-out bed across from your bed. You started to perk up a little bit. Started to become your old self a little bit then, but you were still really subdued. And then after another week or so, they gave us our walk-in papers. And there's a great video of you. And I guess I'll try to attach this stuff in the end of this video. I might as well. There's a great video of you and Mommy leaving leaving Stanford that I took. And then there's a great video of putting you into the car seat, and Mom says, "We're going home." And just the most like pleading, adorable little home that you say. And it's like you kind of half smile, but you also kind of don't believe it. It's like you don't know if you should believe it because you thought things were getting better before, like halfway into the experience. So we left with you that day. And that began the new phase of recovery, which was the next 6 weeks of getting you back into the swing of things at home. We have to give you medications, these beta blockers, making sure that's on the regular schedule, going back periodically to Stanford for tests and stuff, which we're still doing, but not as frequently now. And luckily, I was able to spend my time with you day in, day out during that 6 weeks. And it reframed everything. To me, you're a miracle. I love you. I love you. You're like the most amazing gift to me in my life. And I imagine I can still be an asshole and lose my shit, but I try to do that way less. I try to really put into perspective for me the preciousness of life. Who gives a fuck if you spilled milk on the carpet? And I just try to be more present with you. I hope I succeeded at that. I really hope that I've succeeded at that. It is my primary mission, is to spend good time with you when we're together, as much as we can, as much as is possible. And there is a piece of music that I listened to on those late nights at 3 o'clock in the morning when I didn't know if you would live or die, or if you would survive the surgery, or what. 3 o'clock in the morning or so was about the only time I could ever really get away and be alone, just to sort of think, because you were usually asleep by then with Mommy, and the halls were empty at Stanford, and we lived in your hospital room all the time. And I could just sort of wander around alone. And I listened to this one piece of music, and it has become... It's a live show. I'll put a link to it. But it's become it was a rite of passage. It's a ritual. It's become a sonic ritual. Yeah, I listened to it all the time before you were in there, in Stanford. Since being in there, I listen to it only when I can listen to it with the proper reverence and respect, because it takes me right back to that moment and right back to those nights. And shortly before we left, a few days before we left, we know that we were headed home. So we kind of knew what was going on. We knew you were okay for now. I could finally kind of breathe. And one night I was doing laundry in the family, I forget what the family lounge they call it. There's one on each floor there, where you can go in and keep your food in the refrigerator, microwave, hang out in there if you want, do laundry. And I went up there, and it overlooks this courtyard. And there's a courtyard at Stanford. It's like a learning garden with displays of, lions and different kinds of animals and slugs and all these things. And it just looks like a normal sort of like learning garden. I'll post a picture of it as well when you first walk in there. But if you really ponder it, as I did that night, you realize that the double doors that lead from the inside of Stanford Children's Medical into that interior courtyard, and people would eat lunch there. It was right next to the cafeteria. But in any case, the main doors that lead out to that, there's a pair of tiny footprints, like children's footprints, that were intentionally laid in the cement when they poured it. And as if you follow those footprints, it takes you on a loop around the different displays. And when you get to like the bird type of display area, it turns into bird footprints. And then you get near the little mountain lion thing, and it turns into mountain lion footprints. And it continues to go around. If you go all the way around, it breaks off. And you can either follow one set of footprints that leads back to the front door, or you can cut across, directly across the center of this learning garden, following another. And if you follow that path, it takes you through the middle of this learning garden and all the fun time kids stuff. And I'll include a piece of writing that I wrote about this during this moment when I was listening to this music, overlooking that garden several nights before we went home, thinking these thoughts. And I later wrote about it, and I'll include that. But if you go to the right, you cut through this learning garden and all this fun time stuff, and on the other end of that is a labyrinth. And a labyrinth is this thing that you walk. It's an ancient medieval process of contemplation and prayer. And the labyrinth is meant as a spiritual tool to find your strength. You wind through the labyrinth to the center and then back out. It's a long and circuitous path that sometimes looks like you might not get out of it. And there's a little blurb on a sign about that next to it. You go to that labyrinth, there's the labyrinth. If you then go beyond that labyrinth, it takes a turn around a corner into a private garden, a secret garden, a cloistered nook with grass and this beautiful heartbreaking sculpture, modern art. You'll see it in the picture of ostensibly a mother or a parent leaning down and merging with and picking up a kid who's reaching up, or comforting that kid, or the kid is comforting the parent. You can interpret it in any one of those ways. And in this little secret garden are little recessed nooks hidden by trees with benches where families could sit separately, overlooking this statue. And on the other side of the statue is the chapel. It's the chapel for prayer. It's the chapel for funerals. And as I looked down on that display that night, I realized some people go into this place and they never even realize what's happening with that layout. That layout is a fork in the road. That layout says some of you will leave through that front door again, as we were lucky enough to, with your family intact. And some of you will have to go through a labyrinth of pain and self-discovery. And the best you'll ever get out of the experience will be to have those private, quiet times alone, sitting in that secret garden in the last place you ever spent time with your child who is gone, who will never experience any of those things that life has to offer, and you became so close to that being you. And when I contemplated that, I just broke down and sobbed. I sobbed in that family lounge at 3 o'clock in the morning. And it was the first time I was able to just release all that emotion I had. And I was so grateful. And I just said out loud, I said, we almost lost you. We almost lost you. We almost lost you. And then I started saying, thank God we didn't. We didn't. We didn't. We didn't. And it was just such an overwhelming mixture of emotions. And I am so grateful you're here. And there's so many families who didn't get that privilege. I put off making this video because it's hard to relive. I'm just so glad you're okay. I'm getting therapy around this shit now. It just started this last Wednesday, so I can kind of deal with some of it. You and I are back running around, going out, having adventures. We finally went back to Twin Lakes Church like a couple weeks ago. That was a big step for me. Finally went back over the very same place where the incident happened. That was a big step for me. You are an amazing and intelligent and just energetic bundle of fucking amazement and joy. And I love you, man. All right. That's the story. That's the story of what happened. And I'm so grateful it turned out this way and not the other. In some strand of string theory, it turned out the other way, and I'm just glad I'm not on that string. Fuck that one. All right, buddy. I love you. Okay? I'm going to include a bunch of shit at the end of this, and there we go. And right now I'm going to dry my eyes and wrap up some stuff at work here and get going from there. Don't worry about that part. And I'll include stuff. I'll include a link to that music if you ever want to listen to it, if it's still up and running. I will include some of the videos of you in the hospital and coming out of the hospital and all that. And that piece of writing that I told you about, etc. and so forth. This was a long one, but you know, what can you do? I'll probably break this up into a couple of different installments. Anyway, I love you, buddy. See you next time. We're on the track, on the trail of a wild boo-boo. The wild North American red-headed boo. He's got some sort of device in his hand. Oh, down goes Fraser. Don't let him see ya. Don't let him see ya. He's got something yayo. He's got something yayo in his hands. Oh, piece of candy. Alright. Meanwhile, I'm just getting his habits down, devising a trap that I can spring on him as soon as I get a feel for his customary habits. There's no help out here in the outback. Bobo. Peter. As you can see, he's got a propensity for danger. Alright, I've got to hide and try to spring the trap. I'll check in later.
You're good at beeping, huh?
He loves cars.
The horn on the bus goes beep, 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 beep. The horn on the bus goes beep, 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 all through the town.
He's always on the phone.
Itsy bitsy spider and up the
Show you something purple.
Papa.
Yeah. This is our final stop on this lake trip. All aboard. These are literally, oh, let him bat the balloons again. Doing a bap. Yeah. This is the first time that he has moved and been in any way like excited or, you know, I mean, he hasn't done this at all until the balloons. This is the first, is it not, Pam? Am I lying?
This is the first time since the surgery that he's shown any kind of
yeah, anything. Or that he's bothered moving his arms except for just as much as he absolutely had to. So, awesome. Thank you.
I bet you can't wait to see Freddie. And go home. And go home. We're all saddled up and ready to go. Home. And take care of that hair. And I can't wait to see you back in your home. Boop. It's going to be so good for all of us to be home. Boop, boop, boop. I'm excited. Are you excited? You want to boot my nose? No. Okay. No kisses just yet. Okay, Peter. Y-I-Z!
Yay! Oh, Mr. Elephant. You're amazing, Mr. Elephant.
Hello there.
Wow. Where did you come from, Mr. Elephant? From Africa?
I came from the
Savannah?
Savannah, exactly. I've lost my words.
Oh, my goodness. Oh.
Would you like to strangle me?
You want a kiss? You want to kiss the elephant?
Can I have a kiss?
Oh.
Oh, darling boy.
One last thing I forgot to say, leading up into this next little part, is that what could have been the worst Christmas of our entire lives was the best Christmas of our entire lives. You came home 2 days before Christmas. And so the stuff you're going to see from Christmas here is truly special. Okay. What was that? Oh my gosh. It's Santa, look. It's Santa Claus.
He's like, what?
Oh my gosh. It's Santa Claus. Did you see that? Oh my goodness.
Who's this guy?
Oh. Merry Christmas, little buddy.
I'm pretty sweaty. I'm checking.
Really?
That's what I want for
I'm
Christmas.
pretty.
You do?
He wants to talk to him immediately.
That's a really good point.
Oh, give me a hug. How about
Give
you get
me
in
a
these arms here?
hug.
Oh.
I love
Be
you.
careful with his chest.
Mwah, mwah, mwah. You're the best little boy that this ever was.
You've been
Really?
very good this year.
You've been a very good boy this year.
I'm pretty great.
Is that how you do it? Well, we got lots of amazing gifts for you. Because you're such a good boy.
If it's going to be commercials, maybe we should put it on Facebook.
Oh, he likes the Santa.
Oh, I'm pretty up here.
Yeah?
I'm
I've been drinking. What?
You.
Well, I had a little fall. Don't worry about all
I'm
that.
pretty.
Well, I was slipped on the roof. I may have had a couple of, holiday cheers,
Pretty.
Well, you're a good boy and I love you. Can I get a kiss? You give me a kiss? Mwah.
He doesn't know what to kiss him.
You have a big beard.
Good boy, Fred.
Yeah,
His name is Santa.
that's right.
That's his belt.
Do it.
Yes.
I'm pretty hungry.
You are. Well, very good.
Yeah, pretty up here.
That's good to know, son. Well, I've got other boys and girls I've got to tend to.
You're the only one on my list this year.
One on my list. Everyone else was bad. So
Okay.
you have fun opening your presents. I'm gonna fly away.
Kind of a scary Santa, I think.